Okay, we moved out here in the shop, and now we're going to take the batteries caps off of this battery. Now, one thing when you take a battery caps off, whether it's one long cap like this or 6 individual ones, you do not want to set this down any place like this because of contaminants getting on the inside of the caps, and then because that'll go inside your battery. So be careful with that. We're going to lay this face up right over here. 6-cell battery. We're going to go ahead and check specific gravity with our hydrometer. First cell, 1150. $11.60. Sorry, I almost said 1150. It's 1160. 1170. Being careful not to spill any electrolyte or splash any electrolyte, although remember it is a combination of sulfuric acid and water. I'll call that one 1160. Make sure and fill your hydrometer all the way to the top. The readings won't be accurate if it's not filled up to the top. We'll call that 1150. And the last cell, we fill it up and we'll call that 1150 right on. Okay, now let's look at our results that we had. We had ranges from 1150 to 1170. The first thing I really want to know, and really no particular order, 2 things. Are they above 1100? And if so, are they within 50 points? 50 points of each other. I had a range of 1150 to 1170, so I have a range of 20. If it was below 1100, see, it doesn't have that margin to get that 11 or that 50 points back. They could all check at 1050, go ahead and charge it, and they might all come up to say 1175, 1180, 1200, except for one would stay down at 1050. You don't know that until you try that and charge it. So the battery has to be above 1100 points for the 50-point rule, and it has to be within 50 points of each cell to be good. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and load test this battery. Even though it is low, I'll tell you why. This battery could test out with specific gravities up 1285, 1300, real good, and fail the load test due to the fact of the internal circuitry of the battery. There's posts and plates that all have to be connected to make this work. So one test it kind of complements each other. You really have to do both to know where you stand. I can't just load test it because if it load tests bad, I don't know if it just needs a charger or if the battery's junk altogether. I can't just check specific gravity because I don't know if the internal circuitry of the battery is any good. Now we're going to go ahead and hook our load tester up, red to red, black to black. Make sure the load tester is backed all the way out before you hook it up. And hooking that up to the negative. We have a load tester. I'm sitting here at about 12 volts, just a static voltage. If I come in here and I hook this up to about 8 volts, 6 volts, and a 12 volt, there's no use even go ahead and load test in it. So I would like to see a little more than 12. We're going to load test it down. Now the scales are, this is, according to battery manufacturer, a 650 cold cranking amp battery. I'm going to load this battery down with this tester with half of the cold cranking amperage rating amperage. So that would be 325 amps for 15 seconds. And this meter will beep when that time is up. So I'm going to load this down. Load it down. I'm watching my top scale actually for 325. There's about 325 right there. I'm at about 8.2 volts and falling, and my amperage is falling. It hasn't beeped. My 15 seconds hasn't elapsed yet, but I backed it off anyway because it wasn't going to get any better. But I do know it did fail. I'm allowed about 9.8 volts at 70 degrees Fahrenheit versus I can go all the way down to 9 volts at 0 degrees Fahrenheit. But room temperature is about 70 in here today. I fell down to about 8.2. I did fail, but it wasn't failing miserably. I knew it was going to fail. I figured it was going to fail because it didn't pass. I didn't have enough specific gravity, wasn't high enough. But what I did do, the reason I charged it or checked it with the load tester was to check my internal circuitry in my battery. So right now I'm within 50 points of each other. I'm above 1100. Specific gravity says I need to charge it. Load tester says I have internal circuitry. The battery is intact. I'll try this. I'm going to charge it overnight, and we're going to see what happens. Okay, this third tester that I have this happens to be a Snap-on. It's a 12-volt battery. It's a percent capacity is all it is. And it does a good job of checking the internal circuitry of the battery. I'm sitting here, it says 12 volts, just like my load tester did, static voltage. I have a setting for a small battery or a larger battery. I'm on the larger battery setting. It has a test button. When I push the test button, it'll come down to about 60, 61%. It's saying about 60%. All that tells me is that this battery, in the state of charge it is right now, is about 60% capacity of what it's designed for. So, there again, my internal circuitry of my battery is good. Okay, so this battery right here, we've tested with a hydrometer. It tested on the high end of low, but they're all within 50 points and above 1100, which tells me it needs to be recharged. I tested it with the load tester, and I tested it with this tester. It tells me the internal circuitry of the battery is intact. We're going to charge this one up overnight, and we'll see what we come back with tomorrow. Okay, so now we have another battery. Checking my specific gravity on each cell. This one I'm looking at 1125. Maybe 1130. Hair over 1125. 1125. Not looking too good for this battery as far as state of charge. 1125. Maybe 1130. Now remember, I'm looking for my 50 points and above 1100. 1125 is pretty close to 1100. And I have 1125. So they're consistent, but they're low. And if you use the scale on your hydrometer, that's on the low side of low, or mid to low side of low. So not looking too great as far as state of charge of the specific gravity. Okay, another tool for checking specific gravity is a refractometer, which we talked about earlier. So far we're just using the float type hydrometer. This is a refractometer, and what you do is you take out a little bit of electrolyte out of the battery, and you put this on the lens very carefully. Put a drop there. Now, what you don't want to do is just smack the lens down, because when you do, battery acid will go over. Set this down very carefully and take it, shine it up to a light, and look in the through the eyepiece. And this is actually, because this compensates for temperature, it is highly accurate. And according to this, I'm running a specific gravity of 1135 on the specific gravity on that cell. When this one is running right on 1125, 1130 on all of them anyway. This is the more accurate, of course, a little more pricey to buy one of these. But this is usually the weapon of choice if you want to go real accurately. Okay, we know our specific gravity didn't pan out for us. We just want to make sure this internal circuitry of the battery is good. Red to red, black to black. Right now I have we'll call this 10.3 volts on my battery, just a static voltage. I'm pretty sure this is not going to pan out and pass a load test. And so I'm going to load this down. By the way, I have a 1000 cold crank, actually 1010 cold crank amp battery. So I'm going to try to load this down to 500. I don't think this one's going to make it. I haven't even moved my amp meter. I'm already down to less than 3 volts. And I can continue to load if I want. I don't have enough current in this battery to move my needle. I'm already down to 0 volts. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out this one failed the load test. So from this test, as far as internal circuitry goes, I either have two things wrong with my battery or it just needs to be charged. But because I'm within the 50 points, I'm and my internal circuitry, I don't even know if it's good or bad because I could have a rotted off post here, and that's why it failed the load test. This is backed all the way off. I'll put my snap-on or the percent charge on here just for the heck of it. May not even power this up. Let's see what happens here. Black to black, red to red. Yeah, it powers it up, 7.3. Hit the tester, down to 20%. Okay, failed the percent capacity course as we thought it would. Okay, so based on what we have on this battery, it tested very low on the hydrometer. It failed miserably on the load test and really didn't pass on the percent capacity. And I don't really have a reason right now not to go ahead and recharge this and see if it comes back. Okay, what we have here now is your basic maintenance-free sealed battery. For one thing, you do not even try to take the caps off and open up the battery, so there is no checking specific gravity. Some of your maintenance-free batteries, this one does not, has a little window in one of the corners with an eye in it, we call it, and if the specific gravity is good or is up to charge, it'll be green, and if it's down as far as charge or specific gravity, it'll be black or sometimes red. All that is in that eye is a float type hydrometer. But keep in mind, all that is checking one cell. You could have that one cell is good, the rest of them be dead. That would give you a good 50 points separate and the battery would be junk, but you'll be saying, it's saying, well, it's still green, I'm still good. You're just checking, that is just checking the one cell. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so all we can do on this one is load test it. We're gonna hook red to red. Make sure the load is backed out all the way. It is. Black to negative here. I'm coming up here with a static voltage of about 12.3, which is not too bad for a battery, a charged battery. I'm going to load test it. I have a 950 cold cranking amp battery, so I'm going to load this down to about 475 amps. I'll be watching my top meter, load it down. There's 475 easily, and I'm sitting right at 10 volts. I'm going to wait for my beeper to go off on it. And there's the beeper, time's up. It held steady right at 10 volts. Now, let's talk about what we have, what we're allowed. I'm allowed 9.8 volts on this load tester with the load that I've applied to it. That is half the cold cranking amp rating of the battery at 70 degrees. With 0 degrees, I'm allowed to go down about 9 volts because a cold battery won't produce as much power as a warm battery. I don't have to remember all this. It says it right here on the load tester. So anyway, regardless, I stayed in the green. I stayed at above 9.8. I was at about 10 volts on a 70-degree battery with half the cold cranking amperage load applied to it. Backed out. Remove my leads. I'm going to put my percent tester on here just for the heck of it, because this is what I have. I don't have to check all of them if this is all I have. Just put this one on. 12.5 volts. I've got an auto shuck battery which will work. Push the test button. It tests out at 113% of capacity. Again, this battery is, if I had a problem with a no start or slow cranking, something with this battery, or with this system that this was installed, my battery is not my problem. Okay, I've just rechecked all my specific gravities on this battery. Now remember, this is the one from yesterday, which checked out in a low with about 1150, 1175. They're all within 50. I charged it overnight, and now I'm sitting up about 1175, 1180 on all my cells. So they all came up. I'm all within 50, so I'm good to go there. I have no reason why this won't pass the load test. I'm going to put my because the reason I can say that is because I know my internal circuitry is good because when I checked it yesterday. Put my caps back on. Put my load tester. Do it. Red to positive. Black to negative. Load is backed all the way out. I'm sitting here at about 12.4 volts. I'm going to put the load to it. I have a 650 cold cranking amp battery, so I'm going to load this down to 3 1/4. There's 3 1/4. I'm going to wait for it to beep. There's a beep. Take my load off, and this did pass my load test with about 10.2 volts, and we'll load it down to about 325 cold cranking amps. So this battery is good to go back into service. Now we have our batteries here that we just tested. And now let's go back. This one right here, the maintenance-free battery, passed with load tests, couldn't check specific gravity, so that one's going back into service. This one here, I didn't recheck for you on camera here for the video for you. But it did not pass. This one's going to be recycled. This one here we charged overnight. It didn't pass specific gravity, but it did pass the internal circuitry test with the load tester yesterday. Charged it. It came up to 1170, 1185, something like that, wherever it was, and did pass the load test. This one's going back into service. So I have one there was nothing wrong with, one that there is something wrong with, it's going back to be recycled, one that I had a problem with, it needs to be recharged, and it's going back into service. Okay, we've just covered a few basics on how to check a charging system. Be sure and check your owner's and/or shop manual for things specific to the problems that you were working on for your machine. From AIS Training Center, I'm Steve Sutton.
And I'm Joe Thompson.
Work smart
and work safe.